The world walks on a great pilgrimage, which at its end will find all men equal, save in the nobility of their deeds, but then none shall count but these, O noble soul of noble deeds. This passage was perhaps my father's favorite of the many which he held dear to his heart. Maybe so because it reflected what he had come to understand was the fundamental truth which clearly and simply defined the purpose and reason for human existence. Maybe too because as a person it would define his life's purpose and the fundamental forces which would drive and define his life. One of incredible service to his God, his church, his country, and his family. A life which was indeed defined by noble deeds. I ask you to close your eyes and journey with me a century back in time, 100 years today, January 28, 1911, the date of his birthday. What was the colony of British Honduras like so very long ago? It was a time when life in many ways was simple and uncomplicated. Times were hard, good employment was difficult to find, and wages were extremely low. It was a time when the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," had meaning, but this would so accurately describe his early life. It was a time when horse and buggy and mule and cart and bicycles were the official mode of land transportation, and sail, paddle, and steam were the energy which moved vessels across water. It was a time of religious divide between Protestant and Catholic. He was born Edgar Gilbert Napier, third child to Edgar Alexander and Florence Gegg Spratt. His father, an accountant of the Chico Development Company, and his mother, the daughter of Reverend Spratt, chairman of the Methodist Mission in Belize. At an early age, his father would spend over a year on his deathbed, and at the tender age of 7, after this prolonged illness, he would lose his father, who had not prepared well for this inevitability. The family would soon thereafter be plunged into a state of desperate poverty. His older brother, McFay, would leave high school to go to work at Korea's lumberyard, Korea store for $1.50 a week. His other brother, Bob, the Prindle's lumberyard for a similar wage, in order to support their mother and their younger siblings, Gladys and Richard William. His cousin, Erica Wilson, would pay his school fees so that he could continue his education. But 3 years later, this would also come to an end, as they too had begun to experience difficult times. And so, at the tender age of 10, my father would become a messenger for the Chico Development Company. I can recall the stories which he would recount about these difficult times and the grinding poverty in which they lived. Frequently, when they had not eaten for the day, his mother would send him to the corner grocer where the credit had already been exceeded and had been long past due. And he would painfully and embarrassingly have to ask for a little more. Amazingly, he was never refused. It was a time when Belize understood the meaning of the word community. In the midst of these difficult times, a young wandering Garifuna boy, recently from the Mosquito Coast, by the name of Zoilo Blanco, would one day knock on the door, hungrily seeking a meal, refuge, and a better way of life. In the face of their already grinding poverty, his mother would welcome Zoilo into their family, stretch and share with him what little they had, and raise him into adulthood as another member of the Gegg family. Zoilo would later become famous in the Golden Glove era as a boxer. My grandmother had given him the name Kid Dominica. She was trying to teach him English, and one day he came running up the steps and said, "Mom, there's a Dominica puss in the yard." At that time, all the chickens in the yard were black and white, and Zoila had figured out that everything black and white was called Dominica. At the age of 11, he received the offer of scholarship to continue his studies at St. John's College. Despite their situation, his mother would insist that he accept the offering, saying, "Edgar, you will accept the offer. God will provide." It was this remarkable woman who would mold my father's character. It would be from her that he would draw his life's inspiration. She was a woman of profound charity and profound faith, and held a fervent belief in God and his ability to positively intercede in people's lives. She would instill this same abiding faith in him at an early age. And so my father set off to St. John's College in the Jesuit education, which would stress the development of the entire man, body, mind, and spirit, which was enshrined in the Latin phrase, "Mens sana in corpore sano." He realized that an education would be his way out of ignorance and poverty, an opportunity which he could never have imagined would ever have come his way. He would diligently apply himself and excel in every subject, and at the end of his 5 years, he would be the valedictorian of his graduating class. Even though he excelled in his studies, he would also be a completely rounded student and athlete. Having discovered that he had a powerful and wide-ranging baritone voice, he would join the Glee Club, singing as an alto. He was elected president of the debating society, and he and his debate partner, Freddie Gegg, would never lose a debate during the year in which he led the group. While at St. John's, we discovered that he also had the gift of oratory and elocution, for which he received many gold medals. He would make his stage debut in the famous Box and Cox play, playing the role of Box and his best friend, Nacho Valdez, playing the role of Cox. This is where he would first feel the thrill of stardom. The major event which would profoundly change his life was his conversion to Catholicism. Even from what he would describe as his Protestant perspective, he could not help but be intrigued with the teachings. During a weekend retreat which he attended, my father would consolidate in his consciousness what would become his life's guiding principles and his life's commitment and undertaking. It is here that we would learn the spiritual teachings of St. Ignatius Loyola, the founder of the Jesuits. Man's purpose on earth, to praise, honor, and serve God in this life, and to be happy with him forever in the next. This final destiny would be achieved by using the creatures which one is endowed with by the Creator, these being sight, senses, hearing, talents, and graces which would be derived from the sacraments, and in particular, the Eucharist and the Mass. He came to realize that the talents which were given to us in trust were to be employed not only in working out our own lives and our own salvation, but also that of our fellow man. My father would make the resolve that weekend to devote his entire life and the many gifts God had given him towards that end. In pursuit of the commitment which he had made during the memorable retreat, shortly after graduation in 1927, my dad would join the SJC Alumni Association. He would hold the positions of secretary, vice president, and most of these years as president, during a period which would span 37 years. It was my father's determined effort to give back to his alma mater, while at the same time also help them to serve and educate the greater Belizean community. He would start the first Land of Affair, which would become the premier annual social event at the time. I remember him telling me as a little boy that the fair had earned staggering amounts of money, given the day and the age of which we speak. With his two lieutenants, Jim Wade and Charles Woods by his side, the Land of Fair, year after year, would become the chief fundraising initiative which would finance the scholarship fund, thereby enabling SJC to grow, pay its bills, and better serve the Belizean community. In 1971, when SJC commemorated their 75th anniversary in Belize, my father received the President's Citation Award. In his letter of commendation, Father Weber would thank him for his contributions, indicating that because of his contributions through the Land of Fair and other fundraising initiatives, St. John's College was able to offer some form of scholarship to 50% of its entire student body. If I may quote Father Weber, your contribution is primarily to the students who benefit from your help. But your contribution is also to the community which needs the talents and the skills of these young men. And your contribution helps to make it possible for St. John's College to continue to serve the community. I am deeply grateful, unquote. This initiative would spread to every Catholic parish within Belize City and throughout the entire country. It became an annual pilgrimage in which my father and my mother would religiously go from one parish to the next, Holy Redeemer, St. Ignatius, St. Joseph, St. Catherine's, building and spreading and teaching the Bazaar concept. I remember him telling me that the Palatine nuns were late to come to ask him for his assistance. In 1962, after the devastation of Hurricane Hattie, Sister Dosatier would come to him to share with him that they were having difficulty paying their bills. Would you please make a bazaar for us, she would ask, in her heavy German accent. In the case of the Palatine nuns, he would only have to teach them once. When the time for the second event neared, he noticed that he had not been summoned by them for his assistance, and so somewhat concerned, he would inquire why. Sister Dosatier would embarrassingly admit to him that they felt guilty asking him again, and she said to him, Mr. Gegg, thank you. You have taught us so well. We know how to do it ourselves. These fairs, these annual pilgrimages, as in the case of St. John's College, would become the primary fundraising events for the greater Catholic Church, which would enable them to build schools and spread Catholic education and ministry to every corner of this country. This was long before the church-state relationship which exists today. While I was trying to qualify and quantify my father's contribution to the development and spread of Catholic education in Belize, Bishop Martin recounted to me recently that at its peak of influence, Catholicism had been embraced by some 95% of the Belizean population. It would be fair to say that for over a period of 50 years, my father's steadfast annual commitment to fundraising for the Catholic Church would in a tangible or intangible way touch almost every Belizean's life and education at the primary, secondary, or tertiary level. When Belize gained its independence in 1981, it could boast 95% literacy for its people, one of the highest in the world. My father would know deep within his heart that he had played a major role in helping to lift the greater Belizean population out of ignorance, which would also now give them the opportunity to lift themselves out of poverty. Governor Hawksworth would appoint him to be a nominated member of the Legislative Council at the age of 34. This was the colonial equivalent of our current House of Representatives. He would serve from 1945 to 1954. While it would have been politically expedient, comfortable, and also profitable for my father to cozy up to the British governor who had appointed him and help him to maintain the status quo, my father had come to understand that colonialism in Belize was a bitter experience which had created two classes, the exploiters and the exploited. Having lived the experience in his early years of grinding poverty, he would feel the challenge to make this contribution to his community in another realm of activity. For he had come to also realize that as much as an education was a necessary tool for one's personal upliftment, there must also be individual opportunity in an equitable business environment. As a member of the Christian Social Action Group, he would be exposed to the Catholic ideas on the rights of the worker and social justice, which would be derived from the papal encyclical Rerum Novarum. This group included some of the notable men in early Belize's political history, such as John Smith, Lee Richardson, Herman Jecks, George Price, Philip Goldson, Nick Pollard, and my father. My father in 1947 would call upon Catholics, and especially SJC alumni, as president of the association, to assume the political leadership of this country. He would challenge and inspire them with the following words, and I quote, "Who are leaders? Or rather, who should be our leaders? Obviously the best suited to lead the educated class. Men who in their boyhood days were instilled with the right principles as regards their duty to their fellow men, to their country, and to their God. In a word, the alumni of St. John's College." But do we take the lead in the affairs of our country? The lead we should take? Is our leadership as outstanding, as pervading as it could be? Embarrassing questions, these. It is true that we do lead to some extent, but ours is timid, half-interested, divided leadership, lacking in concerted and determined action towards definite objectives. What part did the alumni play in the politics of British Honduras? The truth hurts terribly. Since we have but one alumnus, myself, on a legislative consisting of 7 elected and appointed members and a single representative on our town board. It is obvious from this that we do not exercise the influence in the government of our country and in formulating public opinion that we should, and that as a body we have seldom if ever had the temerity to raise our voices above a faint and an ineffectual pleading against any measures which the government has decided upon. The result of this is that in the past, some laws have been enacted that have not been in the common good, unquote. By 1953, my father's challenge would see the Legislative Council numbers swell with the very alumni who he had a few years earlier challenged to get involved. Notable in this parable is the vote taken in 1953 by LegCo against 30% devaluation of the British Honduras dollar by its members, Espat, Courtney, Smith, Macmillan, Clark, Fuller, Bengouche, Gegg. Membership which now included 4 alumni of the SJC would all vote against devaluation. My father's challenge at the same time, his approach to the members of the Alumni Association for their lack of initiative in the pursuit of more involvement of the affairs of the colony, would spark the move towards self-governance and thereafter independence. He would become the driving conscience which would first spark the formation of the People's Committee, to which he was a founding member, and thereafter the formation of the People's United Party, the political organization which would eventually lead Belize from the status of a oppressed British colony to an independent state. Later on, differences in approach between him and Price would cause my father to step back and allow George Price to lead this initiative. He would, however, throughout the rest of his active life, support Mr. Price's initiative to bring Belize to become an independent state by serving him on almost every imaginable government board or institution during the years leading up to independence and thereafter. During the period 1954 to 1987, he would hold innumerable public appointments. Most notable among them, he was a founding member of the board of directors of the Central Bank. and a member of the Committee on the Reorganization and Restructuring of the Public Service in Belize. I remember him telling me once of his conversation with his close friend Willie Hoy, who shared with him his life's experience working as a public servant. He would tell my father, "Valley, working in the public service is somewhat akin to living in genteel poverty." With this in mind, my father's constant passion for social justice would see him press the initiative which would eventually develop the blueprint which would transform the lives of all public servants and teachers, ensuring that their working conditions, wages, and benefits would continuously match or exceed those in the private sector. In his private capacity, my father would serve as Secretary, Vice President, and President of the Chamber of Commerce from 1940 to 1965. It was during his tenure as president that the Chamber would establish its first permanent office at the corner of Craig and Daly Street and hire its first executive secretary in the person of his godson, Skippy Fuller. His contributions throughout these 25 years of service to the development of commerce and industry in Belize is immeasurable. In his furtherance of helping to build the Belizean individual, he would learn the concept of credit unions and cooperatives from his mentor, Father Marion Gainey. Soon thereafter, in 1943, he would assist in the development of the first credit union founded in Belize, St. Peter Claver in Punta Gorda. He would shortly thereafter become one of the driving forces behind the founding of the Holy Redeemer Credit Union and serve as its first president for 4 years. Today, HRCU boasts 44,000 members and $350 million in deposits. He had come to understand that as a part of becoming the complete individual, which he had learned from the Jesuits, that the discipline of thrift and saving should also be an integral part of becoming this complete human. It was their mutual love of the arts which would draw my mother and father together. She had just returned from California as the first Belizean woman to earn a bachelor's degree. Cupid's arrow had struck, and after a year's courtship, they would marry on a moonlight morning under the most austere circumstances. This 64-year-long marriage would produce 10 children: Therese, Michael, Catherine, Mary Louise, deceased, Dorothy, Mary Alice, Robert, David, myself, and Peter. At the age of 16, after a brief stint as a clerk at Harley's, my father would move to Milano's store before summoning up the courage to step out into the world of business. He would start the Vogue Limited. The Vogue would grow to become one of Belize's leading businesses. It would comfortably provide a life of privilege for his children and his family. Because he had come to appreciate and understand how important education was, and with the insistence of my mother, my parents at great sacrifice would ensure that each of his 9 children would receive a university degree abroad. Having benefited from the assistance of so many during his difficult times, when he had built his business to a level of success, it would become one of his practices to provide compassionate credit to so many. He would help thousands of Belizeans to get their start in life this way. My father would also make seminal contributions to the development of the tourist industry in Belize. He would provide the seed capital and support to my brother David through the early difficult years when tourism was more an idea than a thriving industry. My brother would be the one responsible to single-handedly bring cruise tourism to Belize's shores. He would also roll the dice along with me and my cousin Jimmy as he helped to fund the discovery and development of the first commercial deposit of gold, silver, and platinum in Belize in the Chiquibul Forest. The Edgar Gegg house would in many ways typify the Florence Gegg Spratt home. My parents would open their home and their hearts to so many who would find need. In the early 40s, it would become the first home of a German Jew who was fleeing persecution of Jews in Hitler's World War. As his mother had done before him with Zoila Blanco, my father would embrace Moody Stock, a wandering soul seeking refuge from extermination. He would care for him, teach him to speak the English language, as he spoke not a word, and thereafter help him to assimilate into the Belizean community. A few years hence, another colorful world traveler would wash up on our shores. Shipwrecked, flamboyant Emery King would first call 71st Street his first home in Belize for many months, and the sofa in the living room his bed. Immediately after Hurricane Janet in 1955, the entire Willie Gegg clan would move to live with my parents for 2 years as Uncle Willie slowly rebuilt his life, his home, and his business in what was then a devastated Coruscant town. In 1961, when Hattie devastated Belize City, Uncle Willie would reciprocate by bringing our entire family to live in Coruscant for a while. It would be my profound blessing to witness, some 5 years ago, the return of Zorlo Blanco to the Gegg home after having been away for nearly 75 years. Having prospered in the USA, he was retracing his early footsteps from the Mosquito Coast to Belize. He had come to thank my father for all that the Gegg family had meant in his life. Not having seen each other in such a long time, they embraced like the brothers they had been. They hugged, they held each other's hands, and they wept with joy as they both realized that their life's journeys would soon be coming to a close. As a devout Catholic, my father's commitment to serve his church would also be a lifelong undertaking. He was a regular member of the choir, having joined from the age of 18. He would stand at this very pulpit leading song for almost his entire adult life. He would similarly serve on the Holy Redeemer Parish Council. He realized early on that Catholics were not faithful tithers, and so he would have to inspire, cajole, beg, in order to encourage the congregation to give to the church's needs. I remember so many fundraising initiatives launched from this pulpit, when the leaky roof needed changing, when the church needed a new paint job, when people were at risk falling through the rotted floor. My father would jump to the task of finding the money. In the case of the floor, he would buy the materials, and then Iskander Bedran would volunteer his entire work crew from Cairo to lay the new onyx floor. I remember when it was decided they would rebuild the parish hall, Bishop Martin would commend my father on its inauguration for single-handedly raising 25% of the total cost. He would institute the fundraising initiative, the Bishop's Diocesan Fund, which would annually provide desperately needed liquidity for the Bishop's pastoral needs. His love of the arts would see him star in countless plays. The annual Passion play, written and directed by George Price, was a usual hit. Arsenic and Old Lace and so many others would entertain Belize long before the advent of radio and TV. In the latter part of his thespian years, he and my mother would become founding members of the Belize Chorale Society. They would produce many night operas from Gilbert and Sullivan, such as Carousel, The Mikado, Pirates of Penzance, HMS Pinafore. My father would usually play a leading role. He would be as comfortable with a dramatic role as he was when making a fool of himself doing comedy, such as Puba in The Mikado. My father was a founding member of the Rotary Club. He served for some 25 years as honorary consul for France and some 30 years as honorary consul for Belgium. In his later years, he and my mother would study to become lay ministers of the Word in the Catholic Church. In the last 20 years of their lives, they would attend Mass and receive the Holy Eucharist almost every day of their life. Before he would retire from public life, he would once more respond to the request for help. This time, not from a Catholic institution, but from the Salvation Army. He had come to realize the good work which epitomized their ministry in Belize. He also recognized their great need And so for the first time since his early days as a Methodist, he would step outside from the Catholic realm. And from 1975 to 1984, he would chair the Salvation Army Advisory Board, whose primary purpose was to raise funds for their ministry with the poor. He would come to realize that these were good people also doing God's work. As the measure of time had softened interdenominational conflict, he would come to the conclusion and realization that had he not already been a Catholic, he would have been quite comfortable as a Salvationist, as he had come to understand and realize that the work and the mission was essentially the same, serving God by serving his fellow man. For his life service to others, my father received 18 awards. Time does not allow me to list them all. In his waning years, he would write his autobiography, A Peek into the Past, and in the process recollect the remarkable journey of the life which he had traveled. He would know that within his heart and within his soul, he had fervently and with diligent and studious passion completed his life's undertaking and promise to use his creatures in the service of his God, while at the same time bringing his fellow man along. His purpose on earth to praise, honor, and serve God in this life had certainly earned him the right to be happy with his God forever in the next. This final destiny brought him to realize that the talents which were given to him in trust had been well employed, not only in working on his own life and salvation, but also that of his fellow man. He had, through his lifelong involvement, been in innumerable spheres of activity, fulfilled his life's resolve. He would say, "We have lived a full and productive life which embraces the arts, acting, painting, singing, music, sports, politics, social service, fundraising, religion, thrift and savings, commerce and industry." He would write in his memoirs, "Inevitably, my story and that of my family is intertwined with the history of this very special place and the changes and developments that have taken place. It has been a life filled with good times and laughter, and hard times and immense challenges. Above all, it has been long, fulfilling, and always interesting." My father was a transformational influence in the history and development of this country. His guiding and challenging conscience, his call to action and reproach against apathy and inaction would become the defining energies which would inspire and encourage the building and the foundation upon which our independence movement would grow and flourish. The first two prime ministers of independent Belize would by no accident be graduates of St. John's College and members of the SJC Alumni Association. Our last and current Prime Minister are also alumni and graduates of St. John's Sixth Form. A fearless pioneer, he was unquestionably a founding father of this country. In many ways, he is the Thomas Jefferson of independent Belize. He is the Belizean Mahatma Gandhi who repeatedly spurred dissent against British rule. These are the seminal and defining contributions which my father, Edgar, Gilbert, Napier, Gegg, would make to his beloved country, Belize. This 100-year journey now draws to a close. We have come to the end of his life story. As we gather here to celebrate his life, may his life of incredible service to his God, his country, and his fellow man become a shining beacon of inspiration. May we learn from the example of his life by first understanding the true meaning of the word service. It is the noblest of all deeds. May this beacon of love and inspiration and his legacy of a life of service now live on through all of us. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of those who in recent years helped to care for my father, to nurture him to come so close to his 100th birthday. Debbie, you are the rock of this family, and I know that he cherished you dearly. Gloria, Kira, he loved you dearly, and you loved him back, and you took such good care of him. Mitch, George, Walter, Maid Marion, thank you so much for bringing him the host when he was closed in. And all the other ladies, I think Wanda and Pauline were also there. Dr. Sosa, you helped the Bridges life tremendously, and thank you so much. Mr. Waite, Nurse Lashley, all the caring professionals at the KHMH, the ambulance crew who helped with who ferried him back and forth so many times. Anyone who helped in any way, thank you so much. Our family owes you a special debt of gratitude. I am deeply indebted to Nick Paula Jr. and Malika Crone for the priceless documents which chronicle my father's early life. I want to thank all the Geggs who have traveled so far to come here on this special day to be with us. I want to thank the Chorale Society so much. I know he's here with us, and I know he's enjoying your music. Nalita, thank you so much too. And my brothers from the Mission Singers, Mass and Blues, Frankie Reynolds Mass, thank you so much. I know you did it for him, and he's here enjoying it. So, thank you all. The world walks on a great pilgrimage, which at its end will find all men equal, save in the nobility of their deeds, but then none shall count but these. O noble soul of noble deeds. We love you dearly, Dad. We already miss you deeply, but we shall soon meet with you in the great beyond. Happy birthday.